Welcome to another episode of 10,000 Roads to Financial Independence today. And I'm your host, Elisa Zhang. And today I have our guest, Darren Light, coming with us. And Darren's a successful multifamily investor. He also owns a very successful fix and flip business. And Darren used to be a mechanical engineering, and then he took kind of the plunge into the investment world. So we're going to kind of get into this story today. Darren, really nice to have you on our show today.
Thanks, Elisa. It's great to, number one, catch up with you as well as hopefully provide some value to your listeners.
Awesome. And Darren, I know way back, probably 3 or 4 years ago, met in an investment conference. And then the friendship just kind of grew from there. So today I get to interview him and really kind of dig into his mindsets a little bit more. He's always a go-getter. So really happy to have him on the show. So Darren, we're going to go way back. I usually launch our interview with this question, which is, when you think about in your childhood, is there a particular incidents or people that you feel like gives you the most influence and shape who you are today in terms of entrepreneur mindships and investor mindset?
There's, I would say, two people in particular, and one was my great-grandfather, who actually passed away when I was still a young child. But what I learned about him and from him was he had his hands in all types of business. He was, as far as I know, he was not college educated, but he owned a logging company. He owned a grocery store. He owned a bunch of land. He drove a school bus. He worked for the state trooper's office at some point in time. And I saw him do all these different things and heard, all these different stories. I think that had a lot to do with, at some point in time, probably much later in life, obviously I realized, oh man, that was really cool. He was a true entrepreneur. And at the time when I knew him, I didn't realize that. And then my other grandfather was, even though he retired from Eastman Chemical Company, he hobby farmed. And so he was always had his hands in something as well. Those would probably be the two biggest ones. My dad was an accountant, not much of an entrepreneur. That's what he did his entire life, retired as an accountant. But looking back and just thinking about it from that perspective, those would be the two biggest ones.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes what you not want to be also influenced you. So perhaps your dad has some influence on you too. What not to be, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into more into that as we talk about what my W-2 career was and so forth. But great point. Yeah,
awesome. So have you, growing up, given that your dad is an accountant, is there like always a kind of path chosen for you? Like, is life pretty much like, in a way, pre-designed, or per se? That's kind of how I grew up. Or is it more kind of like free form? Your dad let you kind of dab into whatever that's interesting in?
I grew up like most people, where my parents told me, you need to go to college. We're going to make a way for you to go to college. And because at that point, not until much later in my adult life, that I realized, even though I had that influence as a child, was sort of that background and knowing what that was later on in years, you were still taught, and in school, it's still the same. Let's go get a job. Let's invest in our 401. Let's take out the money when we're 65, 70, whatever it is, have maybe 20 good years left, and then you can do whatever. So I think I had the traditional influence, and it wasn't like it was pounded into my head, but I think that was just an expectation that my parents put inside our, if you will.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you went to college, I understand, after you went through and your school and all that stuff. How did you decide that you want to do mechanical engineering?
I sort of fell into it. It wasn't the first thing I wanted to do. I'll just be honest that the very first thing I wanted to do with my college degree was to be an educator and a football coach, which I think actually speaks a little bit to my mentality today, the coaching part of it, and motivation and inspiration for other people. So full transparency. I was married. I married young, and I realized that my wife at the time was not going to be a coach's wife, because coaches do not make a lot of money unless they're going to coach college or professional or whatnot. And that was just, I just wanted to coach high school and teach, right? That's what I wanted to do.
Right.
And at that point, I was already probably halfway through school. And then I just sort of looked to mechanical, and I had some friends that were in engineering. And then I'd always liked, I had an influence from my stepfather as always teaching me to learn how to work with my hands. I didn't get that from my father. Although my father was a great father, I didn't get that from him. So thankfully for my stepdad, I learned how to work with my hands, learned how to be curious about, troubleshooting electricity, mechanical things, whatnot. And then that's how I just kind of got down that mechanical engineering path.
Gotcha. So in college, you decide to switch a major, realize maybe not a lot of financial future.
Exactly. And that was a big, once I sat down, I'm like, yeah, it didn't take me long to get over my coaching aspirations. So especially looking at pay.
Yeah. A lot of time when we first started, that financial stability becomes very important for us.
Absolutely.
And so you went into mechanical engineering. That's probably some of interest to you. And then what happened? And when did that moment of switching to, like, you start investing, or maybe switching to picking up a side hustle? When did that happen, and what leads up to that?
Yeah, so I was working for a local company, had been there a while, climbing the corporate ladder, if you will. At some point, I became a program manager and was sort of no longer in engineering, but it was a step up. I was traveling to China on a regular basis with contract manufacturers, having those relationships, and loved that aspect of it. But at the same time, as my children were actually getting older, is when I realized, wow, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And I had started a couple of smaller businesses along the way. I had a concrete coating company, which was very successful for about 5 years. But when you have a W-2, a family, and you're trying to run a company, it's impossible. It's hard. And so could never make that leap financially to make that work. And then got into single family rentals and flipping houses in 2016. And then a year and a half later, learned about multifamily and didn't know anything about it until I went to an education conference. And when I went to the education conference, my mindset totally shifted. Got into multifamily, sold all my single family homes, but was still a successful flipper. So continued that to this day. So the decision to go in full time was actually made for me. So I was laid off from my corporate position. And when it happened, I had been in that same position 15 years prior with a different company. And at that time, when you're really ingrained in the 401 mindset, the W-2 job with nothing else even on your mind as far as an entrepreneur or business, you panic. 15 years prior, I panicked. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I've got to get another job. Mentally, that's your initial reaction. And you finally get another job, all's well again, no big deal, right? This time, older, wiser, different mindset, was tired of working for the man, if you will. Literally 6 months before I was laid off from my corporate job, I found myself really observing my coworkers, where it was an open office environment, looking at their monitors and knowing myself was doing the same thing. And I thought to myself, we are slaves to these monitors, and we are slaves to this company, and we are getting one person rich. That's literally thoughts that were going through my head. It's almost as if it was a divine appointment for this to occur to me. But what that did, and I'm so thankful for, was it made my decision easy. And I would have delayed making major decisions to make that happen. I would have stayed comfortable. But when it happened, it was a relief. It was it wasn't a terrible working environment, and it wasn't a terrible company. But it was still not, me creating wealth for myself. So when it occurred, I breathed a sigh of relief. It didn't take me but maybe a few days to decide to bust up my 401 and sell my stock options. And I just took it all and then started investing in multifamily.
Nice. Awesome. That's a big dramatic change. Now, I wanted to kind of go back to the concrete business that you had over there. And unpack this a little bit. So obviously you had a successful business back then. Now, looking back, why did you not decide not to take that leap to a successful business that you had and then quit kind of your full-time job? Now, looking back, make a different decision.
Two different on two different occasions, when I first started the business, I would just go do the work on weekends. I could make it go with a helper or two and pay them hourly. It was very lucrative per job basis, and we could get a job done on a weekend, no problem, or maybe a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever that took. And as I grew, I brought on someone to help me sell, and then actually took on a partner 2 years after. We tried to hire the one person that could run the company for us. On 2 different occasions we tried this, and I think it also goes back to, well, I can say, well, that person didn't work out, that's why I didn't do it. And when in reality, I was too scared to take the leap at that point. Knowing I would be risking my financial future and the comfort of that W-2 job. So I think it was just the risk of that comfort level. You could look back now and, you know, maybe realize what you could have done to make it happen, but you know, I don't believe in regret. I believe things happen to you for a reason, to teach you future lessons. So,
and maybe you weren't passionate enough for the concrete business either.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point, because it was a sales job. It was, hey, Mr. Concrete owner, man, you missed that spot over there. That looks like crap. Whatever that is, you're selling a consumer product, so you're open to a lot more critique, I guess, if you will, or however you want to say it.
That's awesome. Thank you for kind of going deep on that.
Yeah.
Because I like to kind of think about, hey, how does like the track record, like how do you actually like, you know, moving from the W-2 job essentially to that. So you found multifamily. Oh, actually, let's unpack a little bit about the single family. Did you start with a fix and flip business, or did you start with investing into single family first and then later on evolved into fix and flip?
I actually started both at the very same time. So what happened was did a flip deal with a couple partners at the same time as I bought my first 2 single families together as a portfolio. I actually had to do some work on one and had a renter in it for about 14 months and ended up selling it later. So that was almost like a long-term kind of fix and hold / flip.
Yeah.
And then acquired up to 8 rentals at one point in time, self-managing, doing most of the maintenance to the things that I had the skill set to do, and then had to call like HVAC people and what have you and whatnot. But as soon as I discovered multifamily, I was totally okay with selling those properties. No, could not sell them fast enough.
Yeah. And why is that shift?
The shift was because when I learned about multifamily, I learned how scalable it is. I learned that if I want to own a 100-unit apartment complex, it's much easier to finance, insure, maintenance costs are lower, and that I could maintain my debt service by having a few that are vacant. Whereas if I had 100 homes, number one, it would take me a long time to just acquire those homes in itself. Insurance is much higher. All about scalability and time. You know, I'm not a spring chicken. So it was about scaling, and it was about creating wealth with the time that I have left. And the right people were at the multifamily conference to help me learn that very quickly. An hour in, I'm sitting there in my head churning like, oh man, I cannot wait to get out of here. I cannot wait to sell this, sell that. I'm going to start looking for partners. I'm going to start educating myself. I'm going to start networking. And yeah, it just made perfect sense.
Yeah, because Darren, I know you personally. You're always kind of like a fast bullet train. You know, you jump off the and you just kind of go, which is fantastic because I think taking action oftentimes is like the first step into your next big adventure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then a lot of us just never took that one step ahead. Yeah. So
that happens a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, and why did you decide to keep the fix and flip? You know, is it like a huge, and then actually let me rewind back a little bit more. Why did you decide to use fix and flip as kind of your first, the side hustle, not side, but like investing, getting into investment venture?
I think, really, to be honest with you, I went to a guru seminar, if you will, locally, but I had some other people that I knew that were sort of doing it, and I thought, man, I can do that. And I don't know. I guess I just saw the potential return on it at the time. It's 2016. You can still buy. It just goes with the time.
Right.
The housing market in Knoxville was still great, still going, still selling like crazy. Still a seller's market now. There was just a ton of potential, and I had some connections. But I realized as soon as I started talking to people, like, I always knew that I was a connector, a people person, liked the network, but I was really seeing the power that I had to be able to do that. And so the first couple of deals I bought, one was listed, one was not, but both were owned by the same people. And so the property manager that was managing this single family for this couple, she was like, "Hey, they've got another one over here." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to offer them one price for both."
Right.
And I got them for like much cheaper than what I would have if I tried to negotiate them individually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So can you kind of share some tips and tricks as a people connector? Because oftentimes we meet people connectors in multifamily rim of the world. People usually say, okay, these folks are great at like finding deals or finding investors, right? So which both of them are pretty two essential elements of getting a deal done.
Right.
So how did you leverage your people connector superpower essentially and be able to kind of find deals, off-market deals?
This may be a lot, so I'll try to answer the best to
Yeah.
add some value to somebody. So I always considered myself as someone that gave back whatever that was, not necessarily in the form of money, but time, energy, effort, whatever that is. But when I read the book, The Go-Giver by Bob Burg, it took it to an entirely different level for me. And it actually helped me to confirm that that's actually one of my superpowers. And because, as entrepreneurs, sometimes we suffer from imposter syndrome. We go inside, or we turn inward, or we think we're not good enough to actually do something when we know we have the skill set and the knowledge and the people to get it done. And so that helped me realize this is who you are, Darren. You need to embrace it. You need to grab it. And you need to run with it. You may not be loaded with cash to go do stuff to invest, but you have these other skills that a lot of people don't have. On top of that, just recently, Gary Vee, one of Gary Vee's quotes that keeps resonating with me, and I keep seeing it everywhere, and I guess I'm living it, trying to instill it in others. And I'm going to butcher it because I don't think he says both words, but I know he says at least one. And he says, and he said it in one of his conferences, basically he said that authenticity is one of the most undervalued currencies in the world. And I think that when I meet you, I'm just who I am, but I show genuine express interest in who you are and what you have going on. I'm not going to meet you and go, "Oh, I'm Darren Light. I own 263 multifamily units done in 2 years, worth over $11 million of real estate, blah, 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 blah."
Right.
That's a huge turnoff to someone. I'm going to ask you, Elisa, tell me about yourself. Tell me, why do you want to invest in multi? And I just listen. Mm-hmm. But I also am not afraid to share with people my failures. Mm-hmm. And that only makes us better down the road, because if someone thinks you're that guru expert and it's just been bed of roses for you, you're not had to work hard, you've not done anything wrong, you're not going to be able to connect with those people. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you're sharing your life story with everyone you meet, but I don't know. And I've been told by many, many people, there's just an energy level that comes across, and that doesn't mean you're bouncing off the walls, but just genuinely interested in what people have to say, smiling, getting to know them. It's hard to really pinpoint all that, except other than being authentic.
Yeah. And then it's just a genuine interest in people as well, because
absolutely. Here's one thing I believe. Not everyone believes this. There's only two things in this world: people and God. Well, that's what Darren believes. Some people believe that. Not everybody does, and that's okay. But that's what I believe. Yeah. That's it.
Awesome. That's awesome. Okay. So that helped you basically. You probably went to a networking event. I'm guessing what happened over there is then because you are going about this way a little unconventionally. You didn't talk to a broker. You talked to a property management company. And there you're able to kind of creatively seeing the path to finding a deal through property management company, which is really a great tip.
Right.
Like the property management knows how the property is performing and how you can improve it.
Correct. And not just for single family, either rentals or flip potential, but for sure,
Mhm.
property managers that manage multifamily, you can find a lead on an apartment complex. I tell new people trying to get in the game, go talk to property managers. Let them know that you're looking to invest in the area. You want to know about their company and their systems because you're wanting them to think, and maybe you would do business with them, that you might do business with them.
Mhm.
But at the end of that conversation, if you find you strike up a rapport, throw out, hey, do you have any owners that have maybe whispered about selling or might be interested in selling? And most times they have one or two that have kind of thrown it around, mentioned it or whatnot,
Right.
or ask them, just come right out and say, hey, who do you not like doing business with? You do business with currently, an owner.
Mhm. Oh yeah, that's a great
If
question.
you strike up a rapport, they'll
Yeah.
be very honest with you and tell you. Not everyone, but if you do, you never know. You might get that name and phone number.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna definitely put that into my playbook. Good thing we're not in the same market. Anyways, yeah,
The pie is huge.
yeah, exactly. The pie is huge. You're gonna have abundance mindset. There's enough deal for everybody to do.
Yep,
Uh,
absolutely.
and so that's awesome. So from there, you had a successful fix and flip business. Now, did you had to adjust any processes in your fix and flip business, and the other business in order to welcome this new venture that you had? Other than, of course, you made adjustment on your single family by selling them, and in order to have enough capital to buy the multifamily. But did you have other adjustment in terms of business process improvements to make it your other existing business more, how do you say it, more smoothly running in order to take on
I
a venture?
uh, being truthful, I am still trying to automate, if you will, the flipping business. Meaning, I'm an acquisitions manager and someone to run projects. Currently, that is still me.
Mhm.
Am I doing 100 flips a year? Absolutely not. We're doing like 6 to 10 flips a year, but it provides capital, provides living expenses, more connections.
Mhm.
So it's still manageable, but I know that the longer I hold on to that, I'm holding myself back to where you've got to take that leap where you need to make an investment in someone. You need to delegate so that you're not looking at your bottom line revenue, because once you do that delegation, you can explode your business if you make that right hire. So as far as people, not necessarily systems, but really that is a form of a system in the flip business. As far as everything else goes, as far as systems goes, not really.
Mhm. Gotcha. But you are like kind of slowing down the volume because you could do 100 flip, like you said, but you choose
Possibly.
to only do a particular handful of a number that hits your number, and then focus the remaining of it in multifamily.
Right.
And so for someone who's kind of getting into multifamily business, do you invest locally? Um, like what kind of
In
do you play inside?
in my market,
Yeah.
yeah, we invest. So I live in East Tennessee. Our investments are all in East Tennessee. Within 2 years, we did so our track record to date is a 62 unit in Johnson City,
Mhm.
a 41 unit in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a syndication, which already went full cycle. We only owned it 20 months.
Wow.
And then beginning of last year, February 28th, we closed a 52 unit in Knoxville.
Mhm.
We closed another 49 unit March 20th in Johnson City. Now we are closing a 68 unit syndication in Wichita, Kansas.
Hmm.
Wichita, Kansas, boy, that's an outlier, right?
Yeah.
Well, so here's what happens. If you operate your business efficiently and you're given the returns that you projected to your investors,
Mhm.
and you can close deals and you can raise capital, other people see that and they reach out to you and they may say, hey, if you're interested in this deal in Wichita, we'd really like your help in taking it down because we like what you're doing and we believe in what you're doing.
Mhm.
And basically that's what just happened back late fall.
Nice.
And here we are about to do this one. And so I have been out to the market, of course, and love that area.
Yeah.
And there's ample more opportunity, not only with this boots on the ground operator out there, but the connections that he has and that we're continuing to build out. So that's the part that I love about the business.
Mhm.
It's, you've made another connection. Now we're looking at more stuff in that area. But yeah, we do invest local. It's great having it in your backyard so you can put hands on it. We do currently use third-party management. We've talked a lot recently about bringing it in-house, and we almost pulled the trigger actually in January, but we didn't just because we felt we were going to be overwhelmed with everything else we had going on. But I think we may still do that eventually, because we really feel like there's value in adding to our bottom line and just some other things that we want to do as property owners, to be honest.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, because I think the bigger you go, there's always a certain set of a skill. When you reach a certain number of units, it kind of makes sense to have more control,
Right.
and, which creates more margin in the business that you do. Absolutely, that's awesome. There's a lot to impact over there. So what are you guys looking at? So how did you decide you're gonna go with Johnson City or Knoxville, etc.? Or kind of like invest in the backyard, or like what kind of research do you do before you decide that there's a certain market that you're interested in?
Well, I'll be honest, the Johnson City deal was brought to us by someone else, but we jumped right on it. And just being from the area, I knew Johnson City was a pretty good market. And it's a tertiary market, which a lot of people, investors, just hear the word tertiary and it turns them away. But what they don't see is it may not have all the flashy fundamental numbers that a lot of these other markets have. The demand here is incredibly high. There's a med tech center here. There's a 4-year university here. So that's not an issue, and people just have to be educated. Sometimes you have to dig a little further with the local people to really understand what's going on in the market instead of just what you're seeing on screen, right? We knew Knoxville was a hot market because of colleagues that had already invested there and were crushing it with returns. It continues to be a great market. And we knew that Chattanooga was the same thing, just from starting to educate yourself and being in the area and being around and talking to some of the same people, brokers, investors, whatnot. And yes, we did do our own research. And that's one thing that I will stress to any new investor. Your due diligence done by you is critical to you taking someone else's money and putting it into an asset and promising them a certain return. If you think an MSA has certain numbers, you better know down to the street corner what those numbers are where you're investing. You better know the south side of Chattanooga just as well as you do, the entire MSA, because that big picture may not tell what's going on in the smaller picture, and it can bite you if you're not careful. And you better know about crime in those areas as well. So I'm just encourage anyone, make sure you're doing your due diligence, even down to a half-mile radius around your property. It's very critical.
Right. I can't stress enough about the crime, because I think a few of our challenging projects is always combined with either crime or the surrounding area crime stats with that, which hurts the performance of certain properties, especially during this time.
Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. So looking forward, I think, Darren, I understand you're also kind of doing a little bit coaching. You have your own podcast as well. And what kind of value does that kind of bring to you? How did you kind of go about that and then started that?
So in regards to the coaching, I was actually approached by the people that own the education platform that I invested in, where you and I met 3 or 4 years ago. And which was a very big surprise to me. I think, number one, I had some success early. I have high energy level, and I happen to be local, where they mainly operate their headquarters. And I don't coach from the headquarters. It just happened to be. And so having a connection with those people, and I was honored to be asked. Yeah. And I'll tell you what it's done for me is it holds me accountable. To, as I'm coaching these newer investors, I need to know what I'm talking about all the time. But that also may mean I may not have every single answer to the questions that they ask me. Right. But I have an incredible resource and community where I can get those answers, right? Mm-hmm. But what's great is you'll have very novice investors come into the space and you're coaching them. Then you'll have some experienced investors who actually come into the space, but they just want to level up. They just want to get over the hump more. And I learn even from some of the novice people. I learn from them. And so as an individual, I almost feel selfish that I have this opportunity to not only am I pouring into them, but they're giving something back to me. Mm-hmm. And so each time I'm on a call, I get energized. I hope that I'm, adding the same value and energy to them. I've been told that I am. So I love that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Now I'll talk about the podcast. So my main partner and I, Greg Scully, who I met through our education platform, his wife and he are from Alaska. They now live in Tennessee, have now for about a year and a half. They love the area.
Yeah.
They have grown children, nothing holding them down in Alaska. Right. They sold their house, totally packed up shop, and they go back to see family, and they're actually going back soon. But one day, I think he asked me about it, and I just said, you know what the heck? And what it's done for us is it's another opportunity to learn and make connections. Mm-hmm. And like we were sort of discussing previously, we're big on just having people on our podcast that normally wouldn't be on some other podcasts. When we ask them, they're like, really? And local people that are like local wholesalers or local realtors or local investors trying to partner with us or whatever the case may be. But it's been great because we learn a lot. We learn a lot from the people that come on the show. You think you know this person, but when you start asking them questions, really diving and peeling back the layers, man. And then we just take that, and it helps us continue to build our business, add value to more people outside of our podcast circle, if you will. And it's starting to really gain traction now. So it's been fun. It's been a blast.
That's awesome. And then how can people find about your podcast?
Our business name and podcast is Real Wealth Solutions. So on the internet, it's realwealth.solutions. And you can find out about who we are as people, what we do as investors, both from a multifamily and flipping side. And then the more button pulls you down to our podcast, and you see all the episodes we did last year. I had a buddy of mine call me up. He's a realtor in the Sevier County area of Tennessee. And he says, and he actually hosts a local meetup in that area. And he calls me up and he says, this was after we were about 10 episodes in. And he said, I just listened to all of your podcasts. And I said, are you being serious? He goes, yeah, I'm absolutely serious. And he was just saying how great it was, and just wanted to let us know what we're doing was great. And before he hung up, I said, hey, you want to be on the podcast?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah. So just a cool little story.
That's awesome. Making connection as Darren the Connector, always making that happen. Yeah, that's awesome. So if you want to listen to Darren's podcast, that's realwealthsolution.com. And then we'll put that on the show notes below as well. So make sure to check that out. So
thank you.
One question for you is, you have children. So what are you doing right now to install the entrepreneur mindset and spirits and the abundance mindset for them?
So I have grown children. I have a daughter who will be 26 in March. I have a son who's 21. He's a graduate school in Middle Tennessee. So I have not sat them down and had a discussion, but what has happened is they know what I do and they know what I've been doing for the last few years. And I called my daughter out of the blue one day. She's the competitive child who played sports and was captain of the track team and got nicknamed Mom in college because she was in a house with 6 other girls and made sure they all paid their rent on time and the utilities, and just she was that leader, right? She was just in her. Maybe she got it from me.
Yeah.
And
exactly like you.
Probably. So she's very successful, biomedical engineering degree. She works for Oak Ridge Associated Universities. They do projects and things for doctors and researchers and all this stuff. I called her one day, probably a couple years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago. And I said, this is a one answer question and yes or no question, yes or no answer question. And I said, will you run my company one day? And she said, yeah. I said, that's all you need to know from now. Let's talk later. Well, we've yet to have the discussion, but every time I'm with her or she's visiting me or vice versa, she lives in the same town, Knoxville. she'll be like, hey, you got any other houses going on? What are you looking to buy? This and that and the other. And there's actually one in their neighborhood that we're trying to buy on a short sale through a realtor. So she's getting the gist of it. And then my son has done the same thing. He called me out of the blue one day and said, hey, my apartment lease is going to be up into this summer. I really want to move into a house. Why don't you buy one? Let's fix it up. And I'll have my 2 roommates move in with me and they'll pay the mortgage. And I said, now you're talking.
Yeah.
And so I said, do you want to do some of the work? He goes, well, I wouldn't. And that's not him. But I think I don't know. I wonder at times, do they see the flexibility that I have and the freedom that I have, currently, even though I'm back and forth between the 2 main cities I do business in. And so I think it's just, I think they've just noticed it and picked up on it. And,
yeah.
I've told them, I'm like, I don't want you working until you're 65. And
right.
There's multiple ways that we can accomplish that. So
yeah.
That's really it. I'm going to let my son get done with whatever he wants to do with college. And then, we'll just I'll keep dripping on him, if you will.
Yeah.
The term we like to use and kind of go from there. I could totally see my daughter running the entire company, like from acquisitions to execution, and me just going out. And my dream, honestly, is just to fly around the country and raise money and make connections and do deals anywhere.
Yeah.
With the right group of partners, right?
Right.
And then just have her doing everything behind the scenes because she's a bulldog.
She's an executor, basically.
Yeah.
Essentially, we talked about executive visionary.
Yes.
Person, and then you strike to me as a vision person, a more visionary person, and then partnering up with someone who's like really exactly executing that, like your daughter. That would be like a dream too,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what are some books would you recommend people to read, or what would you say to, let's say, your 3 years ago yourself, because you move it so fast, so I gotta shorten it to 3 years versus 5 years.
Number one would be The Go-Giver by Bob Berg, and I'm not going to know the authors of the other books, but Who, Not How, is a good one. Yeah, to read. And then the 12-hour work week. That's well, I'll tell you another one to read. Maybe not. I have read that one, but Make Time. Make Time's a new one that I'm actually still in the middle of, and it just helps you to prioritize and focus your time. There's so many books out there about time and shortening, what you're doing. But one thing that I focus on outside of books, or maybe look for when I'm reading a book now, is it's not so much about return on investment, ROI, as it is now for me, return on effort, return on ROE, return on effort.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had a colleague mention that to me one day, and I'm like, wow. I mean, and it just makes so much sense. Is what you're doing worth your time? Because your time is your time. We all have the same amount of time. It's our biggest commodity, right? It's our most precious commodity. You can't put a dollar value on it.
Mm-hmm.
Is what we're doing, could it be done by someone else while continue to raise capital and go find more deals, or whatever that looks like? In most cases it can be. So, do you need to delegate, or is it something you need to do and you just need to get it done? And there's so many books out there about priorities and things like that, but that's some of my favorite ones that I would recommend.
That's awesome. That's a lot for me to add it to my to-do and read list, for sure, ever growing. And so what kind of habits and routines that do you have to kind of keep you energized and motivated to go out there and give it 100% every day?
Wake up every morning and read scripture, do a devotion, pray. I used to be an every morning gym person, but now I'm still I still go to the gym, but my hours vary. But the gym is on my calendar. I tell people this: if you're into fitness, which I believe is huge because it leads to your mental fitness as well, and your business and everything else, your home life, you've got to take care of your body. And no matter what that is for you, whether it's just walking, lifting weights, yoga, whatever, tennis, something that you do, I do that 5 days a week. And I really am conscious about what I eat. So that to me is just kind of my thinking time to just release, really not even thinking about business at that point. I'm just getting it done, taking care of myself because, we're not getting any younger. And I have a grandchild now, 6 months old.
Oh,
so that's another reason that I didn't need that motivation because I've always been kind of a health nut.
Yeah.
But now that I have that as well, I need to be around. So that is probably one of the big, and you're never too old to learn or a new habit or something that helps you. And I've kind of done that the last half of last year, but especially this year. I have a goal to read 12 books. I've never read 12 books in a year in my entire life. Mm-hmm. And either business or mindset related. And I'm huge on mindset. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing that I'm doing. And some of my books are, Christian related books or whatnot by like pastors and mm-hmm. things like that. But that's about mindset with me as well. So that's probably, the morning time and then the gym time, whatever that looks like, whatever time of day it is.
Which give you energy to get done whatever you need to get done.
Absolutely.
And in order, so kind of to wrap it up a little bit more over here is if you would have the best advice, because you strike to be, I don't ask this question all the time, but you strike to be a person I should ask this question to. To your 3 years ago yourself or 5 years ago yourself, what would you say your best advice in terms of when you're looking back to help you accelerate this journey? Let's say if there's even an opportunity, what would your advice be for your younger self there?
Just make the decision to go for it. Just execute. Just take action. You can learn all that you want to from a book, from the web, from a video, but if you don't put it into action, I'm a firm believer in, and maybe I've done this, maybe my partners and I have done this. I'm a firm believer in take action, even though you don't know everything, and figure the rest out along the way. Because if you try to figure it out all along the way beforehand, you're either going to not take action, or in multifamily, you're going to miss out on the property or the asset at an opportunity. A lot of times you hear us say, sometimes we'll say, well, let's just get it under contract and then we'll figure the rest out. Right. We do that to a certain degree and try to do as much due diligence up front. But sometimes if you don't get this stuff under contract, it's going to get gone. Right. So my advice is just take action and don't be afraid to. In the beginning, multifamily is a long-term game. Mm-hmm. If you think you're going to get rich quick in multifamily, you're sadly mistaken. It takes you 2 or 3 years. It might take you a year and a half, 2 years just to find your first asset. Then it takes you 2 or 3 years to go a cycle to where you could possibly even refinance and get some of your capital back. Mm-hmm. And it may take you longer. So you can't bank on that. So you have to remember that it's a generational wealth game. It's long-term. If flipping, that's different. Yeah, you can make some quick money. Mm-hmm. But you have to take action. Mm-hmm. And you can't just sit on the sideline and try to figure everything out. And I think there's a lot of people that get into real estate in general. And if nothing happens to them or for them in the first 3 months, they just quit. They give up. And they say, well, my W-2 job's not that bad. I'll just stick it out, until I'm 65 or 70. And that's a sad thought to me.
Yeah.
It takes work.
Right.
That's why when you're a new investor, especially in multifamily, there's two types, and there's no more than two. There's one that comes in and realizes how much work it takes and is willing to put it in, figures it out, does it, partners with someone, has a little help along the way, closes the deal, finds the money or has some or both, gets it done. There's another one that comes in, realizes how much work it takes and goes, man, that's a ton of work. But you know what? I've got $500,000. I'm going to give it to Darren because I like him. And you know what? I'll take his money all day long. And that's okay because that person has that realization.
Right.
That's what I've learned, right?
Yeah. And then truly being basically truly passive investing as well.
Yeah.
Which is something that I like to do anyways.
Sure.
Because one of the biggest resources is other people's time and effort and expertise.
Yes.
And then you basically have to pay for it, but you don't pay for it, you actually get a return from it. So
that's a great. I like the way you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So moving forward, 5 years forward now, maybe 3 years because in Darren's time it's all light years. And what are you working on now, and what are you working on? Like, what do you envision where you're gonna be in like 3 and 5 years?
Well, my 2021 goal was to acquire another 200 units for 2021, but I'm not really counting the 68 that will close into February. So if you want to say another 268, that's fine. But in 3 to 5 years, I do want to have the flipping business on automation. Does that necessarily mean I'm doing 100 a year? No, but that means that I am not in it at all. I'm working on it, and I have however many people I need to run that, and truly making a difference in those people's lives that are running it for me, adding value to them, probably paying them more than what someone else would pay them. You're making them work hard, but really rewarding them and treating them like family, and just, really making a difference in somebody's life that way. And the same thing in multifamily. It's great to be able to go to a market now, and we're looking in many places. So it's great to be able to go to a different market now and possibly pull down a deal because you have proof of concept of what you've already done. Mm-hmm. And so people reaching out to you to help them, that's a high level of satisfaction for me. So 3 to 5 years, I would hope that I would have enough monthly income to where that's not really an issue, and I'm just leveling up to help the next person and getting a small chunk of whatever's going on, to be honest. And one thing I'm really passionate about too, and along with my children, is those young people. There's a lot of 20-somethings in multifamily, as you know, and sometimes there's splashes overnight and they're gone, but sometimes they really know what they're doing and they're making it happen. So I want to continue to invest in those people as well, and just kind of pull them along. Nothing better than being able to walk along somebody for 5 years and then see them retire at 30 years old.
Yeah.
And know that you hopefully had a hand in that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Darren, today. We're going to wrap up our interview over here. Again, Darren, where do we find you? Is that realwealthsolutions.com? Where else?
It's actually www.realwealth.solutions. So this .solutions is the tag. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not on Instagram yet, but I need to hop on there as well. One of my goals for this year as well is just more personal branding. No matter what your business name is, it's all about you. Another big tip is people are investing in you. They're not investing in the deal. On paper they are, but they're investing in you. That if you're looking for investors, just remember that.
That's awesome. Sound solution. Yeah, that's a very sound advice, definitely. Well, that wraps up this episode of 10,000 Roads to Financial Independence. Thank you so much, Darren, for joining us today, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure.